Hey everybody, welcome to another deep dive. And this one is going to hit close to home for a lot of Californians.
Oh yeah, it's something that most people don't even think about until they're right in the thick of it.
And that's partition actions.
Yeah.
So we actually got this super detailed legal guide from the Martinez Law Center.
They're awesome, aren't they?
Yeah. And, just skimming through this thing, I can already see how messy these situations can get.
Yeah, you start talking about property and money and family and yeah, things can get heated.
Exactly. So before we even jump into the nitty-gritty legal stuff, can we just take a step back?
Sure.
And just explain to people what a partition action, even IS in plain English.
Yeah, so in California, a partition action is the legal process for when co-owners of a property just can't agree on what to do with it anymore.
Okay, so if I'm picturing this right, it's you've got this property, maybe it's a house or a piece of land.
Could be anything.
Right, and you've got multiple people who own it together.
Right.
Maybe it's siblings who inherited it from their parents.
Yeah, that's a classic scenario.
Or maybe it's a couple who bought a place together and now they're breaking up.
You see that a lot too.
And they just can't agree on whether to sell it or who gets to keep it or how to split it up.
Exactly. And that's when you might need a partition action because it's basically asking the court to step in and make a decision for you.
So it's like the nuclear option when everyone's at loggerheads, but why is it called a partition action?
Well, because you're essentially asking the court to partition or divide the property in some way.
And there's different ways they can do that, right?
Yeah, there are a few different types of partition actions, and the most common one is called partition by sale.
Okay, so that's the straightforward one where they just sell the whole thing and everyone splits the money?
Exactly. It's often the simplest solution, especially if the property is easy to sell and everyone's just interested in cashing out.
Makes sense. But what if one person really wants to keep the property?
Well, then it gets a little more complicated.
So that's where the other types of partition actions come in.
Right. There's partition in kind, which is where they try to actually physically divide the property.
Wait, so they're drawing lines on a map saying you get this half, you get that half?
Yeah, basically. But it only really works if the property is divisible, if it's a big piece of land that can be split into separate parcels.
I can see how that would be a nightmare with a condo or something.
Right. Imagine trying to split a house down the middle.
Yeah, not so easy.
So partition in kind is less common. It usually only happens with certain types of properties.
And then there's that third option, partition by appraisal.
Right. That one's basically like a buyout situation where one co-owner can buy out the others.
Okay, so if I'm desperate to keep the family home, I can just offer to buy out my siblings.
In theory, yes, but the price isn't up for grabs.
Oh, so it's not like I can just lowball them.
Nope. The court brings in an independent appraiser to determine the fair market value, and that's what the buying party has to pay.
So even if I'm emotionally attached to the place, if I can't afford that court-determined price, I'm out of luck.
That's the tough reality of it, and that's why these cases can get so contentious and why it's so important to have legal representation.
Because like you were saying before, these aren't just abstract legal concepts. We're talking about people's homes.
Absolutely.
Their inheritances, their financial futures.
And their families.
Exactly. So the stakes are super high.
And it's not just about the money. It's about the emotional attachments and the history behind these properties.
And I bet that's where things can get really messy.
Oh, for sure. You've got family dynamics, sibling rivalries, old grudges all mixed in with property values and legal jargon. It's a recipe for drama.
No wonder they call it the nuclear option.
Sometimes it feels that way, but it doesn't always have to be a scorched earth battle.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do these cases always end up in a courtroom brawl?
Not necessarily. While some cases do go to trial, many are actually resolved through settlements or negotiated agreements.
So it's like a high-stakes poker game where everyone's trying to play their cards right.
I like that analogy because there's definitely a lot of strategy involved, and that's where an experienced attorney can really make a difference.
Because they know the rules of the game, and they can help you navigate the process effectively.
Exactly. They can help you protect your rights, present your case, and hopefully reach a resolution that works for everyone.
I'm already seeing how this is way more complicated than most people probably realize.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and we haven't even gotten into some of the recent changes in California law that have really shaken things up.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get into next, because this guide mentions some new laws that seem like they could give certain co-owners more protection, especially older folks.
You're talking about AB 976 and SB 1146, right?
Those are the ones California lawmakers seem to be recognizing that partition actions can sometimes be really unfair.
especially for people who are vulnerable or who don't have the same resources to fight back.
So they're trying to level the playing field a bit.
That's the idea. They're trying to protect people from being forced out of their homes or taken advantage of.
So it's not just about cold, hard property values anymore.
No, it's about recognizing that people's lives, their histories, are intertwined with these properties.
And that sometimes those things need to be taken into account.
Exactly. It's about finding solutions that are fair and equitable for all parties involved.
Okay, so we've covered the different types of partition actions, the emotional stakes, the legal process, and some of the recent law changes.
Yeah, we've laid some good groundwork.
But let's get practical. What's like the best piece of advice the Martinez Law Center gives people who are facing this situation?
Oh, that's easy. Document everything. Document every single thing related to the property.
Like what we're talking, receipts for repairs,
Yeah,
emails about maintenance issues,
absolutely.
even text messages with your co-owners about like who's going to mow the lawn.
It might sound excessive, but trust me, you never know what's going to become crucial evidence down the line.
So that crumpled up napkin where you scribbled an agreement about splitting the water bill.
Could be Exhibit A in a legal battle.
Wow. Okay, note to self-invest in a good filing cabinet.
Seriously, organization is key.
And the guide also talks about exploring alternatives to court, like mediation. Is that just a nice idea, or do people actually manage to settle things peacefully that way?
Mediation can be incredibly effective, especially in these types of cases where emotions are running high.
Because it's like having a neutral third party come in and try to help everyone communicate.
Exactly. A skilled mediator can sometimes work wonders. I've seen families at each other's throats come out of mediation shaking hands.
So it's not always about winning or losing.
Sometimes finding a solution everyone can live with is the real victory.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. We've covered a lot of ground here, but I'm dying to hear how this plays out in real life.
Oh, you and me both.
The guide mentions some fascinating case studies like that beachfront property dispute between siblings.
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic.
Okay, you've got to give us the juicy details next time we're diving deep into that case and others to see how California partition actions play out in the real world, so stay tuned. Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into those real-life partition action stories.
You asked for juicy details. You got it.
Hit me with it.
All right, so this one, it's a classic. It's the beachfront property in Orange County.
Okay, I'm picturing palm trees, ocean views.
$1 million sunsets, the whole shebang.
Sounds idyllic. What could go wrong?
Well, you've got 3 siblings who inherit this prime piece of real estate.
Well, jackpot, right?
You'd think, except each sibling has a totally different idea of what to do with it.
Oh boy, here we go.
Sibling number 1 wants to sell it ASAP, split the cash, and move on.
Practical.
Sibling number 2 dreams of turning it into a family vacation home.
Sentimental.
And sibling number 3 had actually been living on the property, fixing it up,
Oh no.
thinking they were going to inherit the whole thing eventually.
I can already see the storm clouds gathering.
Yeah, this is a powder keg waiting to explode.
So what happens? Arguments erupt. Family dinners become battlegrounds.
Pretty much communication completely breaks down, and eventually,
Someone lawyers up.
Bingo's sibling number 1, the one who wants to sell, files a partition action,
So it's like a bomb dropped right in the middle of their family.
and everything just blows sky high.
So what's the court's take on all this?
Well, in this case, the court ultimately ordered a partition by sale.
So they had to sell that beautiful beachfront property.
They did, as heartbreaking as it might seem.
I mean, I get it from a legal standpoint. Sometimes that's the cleanest solution.
Right. But I bet you're wondering about that sibling who was living there, pouring their heart and soul into fixing it up.
Definitely. Did they get completely screwed over?
Not at all. That's where things get interesting. The court took all those contributions into account.
Oh, that's good to hear.
They looked at mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance costs, and of course, all those improvements that sibling had made.
So they got compensated fairly.
Exactly. Fairness is a
now,
key principle in this case.
7-1.
It's like
four,
the court's trying to
four,
untangle
four,
this messy
2,
knot
9,
of family drama
7,
and property
4,
rights.
And
1.
that's why having
Thank
legal
you.
counsel early on is so crucial.
Because an experienced attorney can help you gather all that evidence and present your case effectively.
Exactly. They can help you protect your rights and make sure you're treated fairly throughout the process.
So this beachfront saga, it's like a cautionary tale, right?
Oh, definitely.
Hmm.
It highlights how quickly things can escalate when co-owners have conflicting visions for a property.
And how important it is to have those tough conversations early on.
Before you end up in a courtroom battle royale with your own family.
All right, so we've got the drama, the legal wrangling, the family feud. But there's another layer to all of this that I want to dig into.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The guide talks about how important it is to really understand California's specific laws around partition actions.
You're talking about all those little legal nuances that can make or break a case.
Exactly, because I'm getting the basic idea, but why is it so crucial to dive into the legal weeds?
Well, for starters, California law is constantly evolving. There are new laws being passed, court decisions being made all the time.
So what might have been true a few years ago might not apply today.
Precisely. And there are also a lot of misconceptions out there about partition actions.
Like,
well, for example, a lot of people think that if they own a share of a property, they can just force a sale whenever they want.
oh, I can see how that would be a tempting thought if you're eager to cash out.
But it's not always that simple. California has specific laws in place to protect certain co-owners, especially those who are vulnerable or dependent.
So if you're trying to push an elderly relative out of their home just to get your hands on your inheritance.
The court's not going to look too kindly on that.
Okay. That's good to know. So it's not just a free-for-all for whoever has the most money or the most aggressive lawyer.
Nope. There are rules and regulations in place to ensure fairness and prevent abuse.
Which is why having an experienced attorney on your side is so crucial.
Couldn't agree more. They can help you navigate those legal complexities and make sure your rights are protected.
All right, so we've talked about the law, the drama, the importance of documentation and legal expertise.
We're hitting all the key points.
But now I want to get into something that's often overlooked in these kinds of discussions, the emotional toll.
Oh, yeah. These cases can be brutal on people.
Because we're not just talking about property, we're talking about families, relationships, legacies.
And sometimes those things get shattered in the process.
So what advice does the guide give for dealing with that emotional side of things?
Well, first and foremost, acknowledge that it's going to be tough. This is not going to be a walk in the park.
It's like going through a legal battle and a personal crisis at the same time.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have a support system in place.
So family, friends, a therapist, even a support group for people going through similar situations.
Having people to talk to lean on, can make all the difference.
And don't underestimate the power of self-care.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to take care of yourself during this time.
So we're talking bubble baths, meditation apps, a good dose of dark chocolate.
Whatever helps you de-stress and maintain your mental well-being.
Okay. I'm taking notes. Self-care is officially part of my legal strategy now.
I like it.
Now, before we wrap up this part, I'm curious, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you encounter about partition actions?
Oh, there are a few. The biggest one is that it's a quick and easy way to get your money.
So people think they can just snap their fingers and force a sale.
Right. But in reality, these cases can drag on for months, sometimes even years.
And I'm guessing it's not cheap either.
Not at all. Attorney fees court costs, expert witness fees, it all adds up.
So someone considering this route needs to go in with their eyes wide open.
Absolutely. It's an investment, not a quick fix.
All right, so we've busted some myths, talked about the emotional roller coaster, and stressed the importance of legal expertise.
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
But before we wrap up completely, I want to bring it back to something we touched on earlier, the changing demographics of California.
You're thinking about how that might be impacting partition actions.
Exactly, because we've got a growing population, increasing diversity, multi-generational families all living under one roof.
It's a whole new landscape.
So how do you see these trends influencing the types of properties involved in these cases?
Well, we might see more partition actions involving properties with complex ownership structures.
Like what?
Maybe it's a house that's been passed down through several generations with multiple heirs all having a claim.
Or a property owned by a blended family with step-parents and half-siblings all in the mix.
Exactly. Those situations can create a real legal quagmire.
And then there's the cultural aspect. Different cultures have different norms and values surrounding property ownership and inheritance.
Absolutely. And those cultural factors can play a huge role in how partition actions are approached and resolved.
It's like you need a law degree and a PhD in sociology to really understand the complexities of all this.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and a little bit daunting. I'm starting to realize that partition actions, they're not just about dividing property.
Well,
they're about navigating complex relationships, balancing individual rights with collective interests.
and finding solutions that promote fairness and equity in an ever-changing society.
It's a lot to think about, and I think it's a perfect segue into our final part, where we'll explore some potential solutions and preventative measures that might help people avoid these messy situations altogether. So stay tuned. Okay, so we've explored the ins and outs of partition actions, the different types, the legal process, the emotional roller coaster.
And some pretty dramatic real-life examples.
But now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about solutions.
Solutions.
Yeah, like what can people do to avoid ending up in this mess in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Especially if they're just starting out as co-owners. Maybe they've inherited a property together or they're buying a place with friends.
Right. At that point, everything seems rosy and everyone's getting along.
But as we've seen, things can change pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. Life throws curveballs, relationships evolve, financial situations shift.
And suddenly that shared property becomes a battleground.
Exactly. So the key is to be proactive, to anticipate potential problems before they arise.
So it's like preventative medicine for co-ownership.
I like that analogy.
So what are some of the key ingredients in this preventative cocktail?
Well, communication is huge. You've got to have those open and honest conversations with your co-owners from the very beginning.
Like setting ground rules for the game before you even start playing.
Exactly. And those conversations might be a little awkward at first.
Especially if you're dealing with family members or close friends.
But trust me, it's better to have those tough conversations up front than to end up in a legal battle down the road.
So what specific topics should people be sure to cover in these co-ownership powwows?
Well, for starters, you need to clearly define everyone's ownership stake. What percentage of the property does each person own?
So there's no ambiguity later on.
Right. You don't want to be arguing about who owns what 10 years down the line.
Especially if property values have gone up or someone wants to sell their share.
Exactly. So get those ownership percentages in writing and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Makes sense. What else?
Decision-making processes. How will major decisions about the property be made?
Like repairs or renovations.
Or even the decision to sell.
Will be a majority rule unanimous agreement or something else?
You need to have a clear process in place so that you're not scrambling to figure it out when a big decision needs to be made.
And I imagine those decisions can get pretty heated, especially if there's a lot of money at stake.
Oh, yeah. That's why having a predetermined process can help prevent those disagreements from escalating into full-blown conflicts.
It's like having a referee on standby just in case things get out of hand.
And don't forget the day-to-day stuff, who's responsible for paying the bills, maintaining the property, dealing with any problems that come up.
Yeah, those little things can add up and create a lot of resentment if they're not addressed.
So have those conversations early on, decide who's doing what, and make sure everyone's contributing their fair share.
It's like creating a co-ownership chore chart.
Exactly, but with legal implications.
And speaking of legal implications, what about exit strategies?
Ah, yes, the what ifs.
What if one co-owner wants to sell their share? What if someone passes away and their heirs inherit their portion of the property?
Those are scenarios that people often don't want to think about.
But they can create major headaches if you don't have a plan in place.
So talk about those possibilities up front, decide how you'll handle them, and put it all in writing.
So it's not just about trust and good intention.
Right. You need that legally binding document as a safety net.
And I'm guessing that having an attorney involved in this whole process is a good idea.
It's not just a good idea, it's essential.
Because they can help you draft those agreements, make sure they're legally sound, and protect everyone's interests.
Exactly. They can be your guide, your advocate, and your translator in the complex world of real estate law.
So, to recap, if you're thinking about entering into a co-ownership arrangement, here's the takeaway.
Be proactive, communicate, clearly document everything, and get legal advice.
It might seem like a lot of work up front.
It is.
But trust me, it's a whole lot easier than dealing with a partition action down the road.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about California partition actions.
We've gone deep.
And I want to thank you, our expert guest, for sharing your knowledge and insights with our listeners.
It's been my pleasure.
And a huge thank you to the Martinez Law Center for providing the comprehensive legal guide that made this deep dive possible.
They're a fantastic resource.
To our listeners, we hope you found this episode informative and engaging. And if you're ever facing a partition action or any real estate legal matter, remember, knowledge is power.
Seek expert guidance.
And don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
Early and often.
Well, that's a wrap on another deep dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration of a topic you submitted. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, thanks for diving in with us.
Call now 714-442-9741. Thank you.